Well, hello, everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, Group Publisher of Roofing Contractor, Walls and Ceilings, and Building Enclosure. And I'm so honored to be here today with Tammy Clark. Tammy is a highly credentialed health, safety, and compliance professional who works in the fields of industrial hygiene, occupational and environmental health and safety. And Tammy is also a court-approved subject matter expert and expert witness who holds a Bachelor of Science in Business and Construction Safety, along with numerous government credentials through OSHA, EPA, and DOT. And Tammy has worked in many industries, most importantly, construction. And what's kind of fun to let everybody know is Tammy was named one of the most 50 influential women in West Michigan in 2018 by the Grand Rapids Business Journal and nominated again in 2020. And Tammy was also recently nominated as a top woman-owned business in Grand Rapids for the 2019-2020 year. And I think everyone probably knows now, Tammy is going to be speaking at Best of Success this December in Scottsdale, Arizona. Tammy, I'm so excited to be here with you, and thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Jill. It's great to be back with you again today.
So lots of really important things that contractors need to know about. And when it comes to an OSHA inspection, and we just were running through some really important details, and you're so knowledgeable in this area. So let's talk about it. What exactly do contractors need to know when they are preparing and training their staff for an OSHA inspection?
Well, the first thing that's very important for contractors to understand is that OSHA inspectors do have a protocol that they have to follow. And it's important to understand and be knowledgeable about the protocol so that when an inspector is on site and they initiate an opening conference and they want to do an inspection for whatever reason, there are many different inspection types. It's important that the person who is on site handling that opening conference and walking through that inspection understands and knows the inspector's protocol. Because many inspectors do a great job and we welcome them on our projects. That's what keeps everybody healthy and safe. Doing routine inspections. However, there are a lot of inspectors out there that make up the rules as they go, and they will violate protocol. I've experienced this so many times. And the problem is if the contractor doesn't know and doesn't understand, then they're going to indirectly allow that inspector to make up the rules as they go. And they're going to indirectly give that inspector permission to do a non-compliant inspection. And therefore, they will end up owning whatever comes their way as a result.
So can you explain, we were just talking about this, how do you train your contractors to say to the OSHA inspector, what's the first thing they need to say when that person shows up?
That's a great question. And this is really critical because this sets the tone for the whole inspection. So first and foremost, when an OSHA inspector comes up to a foreman or a crew leader, or even an employee and starts asking questions, it's really important to point that inspector to the foreman or the crew leader or the superintendent in charge. They are supposed to find the competent person for that company, for each company, and initiate what's called an opening conference. So as soon as you are told or the inspector introduces themselves to you, they are supposed to show you their credentials. They're supposed to introduce themselves to you and ask for the competent person on site. So if you're the foreman, the crew leader, or the superintendent, and you say, I am the competent person for this company or for this crew, but I do have to politely and respectfully ask you to please wait while I contact my safety director, because it is our stated company policy that I have to initiate a call to the office, and I am not authorized to handle an OSHA inspection on my own. That's really important that companies have a written stated company policy, that the authorization does not fall on the foreman or the crew leader on site, but the authorization to handle and go through an opening conference falls directly and squarely on company management, the safety director, the safety consultant, or upper management. So if there is a stated company policy in the company's health and safety manual, and the crew leader, the superintendent, who informs that inspector of that, that inspector must, by law, give that company up to 1 hour to get their safety management on site to handle that inspection, or to get on the phone and handle it with them on speakerphone for the foreman or the crew leader. And the OSHA inspector cannot violate a company's stated written policy. So it's incredibly important to have this policy stated in your manual and to train your middle managers to know what to say to an inspector when they show up, so that the inspector doesn't just automatically initiate an opening inspection, because once they do, it's game on. The inspection has begun and you're not going to stop it at that point.
So keywords you said are, I am not authorized. It is my company policy. Can you please wait?
Correct.
Something like that.
Correct. Yes. And I have a whole training that I do with companies. It's called How to Handle an OSHA Inspection. And we go through exactly this, working with company management to ensure that they have the proper stated company policy in their manual, then working with middle managers and directing them and teaching them and training them, even through role-playing activities of how to handle an OSHA inspector and what exactly to say when the inspector shows up, so that you remain in control.
Got it. And so before we talk about the field inspector's manual, so the two most important things, when it sounds like what you and I were talking about just before we got on, were that you need to have an opening and a closing. And so the opening, those keywords, like you were saying, the opening is, I'm not authorized, please wait, I need to call my safety director. And then how do you close that out? So when you're at the end of everything, well, what are the keywords for the closing?
Well, they have to have an opening conference with you. Once they do, they're going to immediately go right into the inspection. So that's very, very important to hold them off. Do not allow them to just ram this opening inspection through, because then they don't have to wait at that point. Okay, so that's opening conference, very important part of this whole process. The closing conference, when we are done, the inspector is supposed to tell whoever it is that they're handling this inspection for them, they're supposed to let them know, these are the things I found. These are the OSHA standards that are in violation. They have to actually give you those numbers. And then they have to tell you during the closing conference exactly what they are going to recommend for citations. And so then they have to close that out. That's the closing conference. At the closing conference, they will tell you that. So there are different types of inspections. And so there will be different types of closing conferences. It always is our goal to get that inspection closed out and to get the inspector on record of what they're recommending for a violation. For example, I just had a client go through an OSHA inspection, and it was very, very important to me to get on record to have the safety director who handled that document exactly what the inspector said at the closing conference, which was, I am not recommending any citations at this time. Well, we noted that, we got that on record. So if something does show up down the road, we can use that and say, no, there were no violations. We have it on record. The OSHA inspector told us there were no violations at the closing conference. It's done. But you have to know how to handle that. And so that's some very important training for people. This is probably one of the most important trainings today, with the additional regulators that we're seeing being hired all over the place. The regulatory environment is really growing. And so it's important for companies to know how to handle this to protect your company financially.
So it's kind of a cool story. Can you kind of walk everybody through what just happened with your roofing client in that OSHA inspection, and how they called you and how you walked that OSHA person through what was going on?
Yeah, so it was interesting. Of course, whenever you hear OSHA's on site, everybody panics, right? But I know that my clients are very, very well trained, to the point where everything they do is very habitual. And I have trained them that the only way that we get consistent, predictable outcomes is to create process and to train and follow that process, enforce the process, and then we're not going to ever have any trouble. So that's what happened. OSHA showed up, walked through that whole process. They got a call. They're a non-union company, so I believe it was a union company who probably called on them, which happens all the time, or a competitor. And so the inspector shows up because by law they have to respond to complaints and referrals. The inspector showed up pretty much anticipating that there was going to be a lot of fall protection violations, and saw all of the employees on the roof wearing their harnesses properly. All the anchor bolts and positioning devices were properly secured in position. So then he began to look at ladders and tools and things like that, and all the ladders were properly established at the proper angles and tied off with the proper extensions above the landing surface. And he just kind of went from one thing to the next looking for something. Finally, he got a little frustrated and said, do you have water? Do you have water on site? And of course, they know in the heat, they have to provide water for their employees. So they showed them the big giant cooler with all the water bottles, and he really couldn't find anything after that. So what he did was he pointed to one of the employees and said, what's that person's name? So they told him the person's name, and he said, I'd like to see that guy's fall protection training. So I then directed the safety director, you only give him that one person's training card. Just show him the documentation he's looking for. You never, ever give them more than what they're asking for. Because he was prepared to send them all these training records and all of this. And I said, no, 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 you never give them more than what they're asking for. And you never offer information, because these inspectors and regulators are very well trained on how to ask you questions, how to ask leading questions, how to prompt employees, and then they will take that information and use it against you when they go back to their office and their supervisor has to review everything, and then they begin writing up the citations. So it's really important to know, it's like an IRS agent. They're very trained on how to talk to you. It's no different. So it's very important to know how to handle an inspection and to know the protocol and the policies.
Yeah, sounds great. Can you show contractors out there, where exactly do they go to find the field inspector's manual?
Okay, so OSHA inspectors get their protocol from the field operations manual. This is what they must follow. This is what they can do and what they can't do. And if you go to OSHA.gov, so I'm going to share my screen with everybody, and I'm going to walk you through this. Go to OSHA.gov. And hang on a minute. Okay, so you go to OSHA.gov, and in the search bar, you type in Field Operations Manual, right? What you're seeing here. When you type in Field Operations Manual into the little search bar in the upper right-hand corner, this is what's going to populate. So we're going to click on this. We'll let it load for a minute. It's working. Okay, and it says OSHA archive. So it says this is this is the original field operations manual that all inspectors are trained on. Notice it says it's an archive, but there is a current updated version right down here. It says CPL 02-00-160. Okay, so we're going to click on that because we want the updated version. And now it says the directive is available in PDF. So we're going to click on that PDF, and here you go. So this is actually a 280 some page document that all OSHA inspectors are trained on. Here's their protocol. It's very important for you as company owners, safety directors, safety consultants to download this, read it, learn it, know it. If you do not know the protocols and you do not know what exactly they're supposed to do, then you are going to give them permission to violate their protocol, and you're going to own whatever fines come your way simply because you were not educated on the process and you didn't stop them. I use the example of the police, right? If you are arrested, so you're arrested for murder, and they do not read to you your Miranda rights, and you know that they didn't read to your Miranda rights, and you call them out on that, I don't care if you're guilty of murder or not, you are going to get off because they violated protocol. So this is incredibly important. So, all right, so go there, download this, share it with your safety director, your safety consultant, company management. And, unfortunately, there's just too much violation of protocols today, but they don't have any oversight. These inspectors are out there in the field all by themselves, and nobody is making sure that they're doing things correctly. So it's our job to know the rules, be educated on this, and to hold them accountable. And I always tell people very respectfully and politely, talk to the inspectors. They have a job to do. They're just there to do their job too. And many of them do a great job. And I've got a great working relationship with many inspectors. But there are some out there that will bully you, and they will intimidate you, and they will make up the rules as they go. And that's where people can end up with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of citations that they didn't need to have, simply because an inspector violated protocol and you didn't stop them. So whenever I see that happening, I just simply tell the inspector, listen, this is really not part of your protocol. This is not something that should be happening right now. So I'm going to have to just ask you respectfully to, either move along, come back when you're following protocol, or come back with a search warrant. The thing is, when you talk like that, some business owners will get scared. They get scared to talk to an inspector like that, even if it's in a nice tone with a smile on your face. They feel like if they question them at all or stand up to them at all, they're going to be targeted. And I just want to address that, because that's a #1 misnomer out there. That is not true. Because think about it this way. What happens in the real world when you stand up to a bully? You might get one black eye and that bully will never bother you again, right? So sure. OSHA inspectors, they know who my clients are, and they tend to leave them alone because we know protocol. We're going to hold them to protocol. We're going to cooperate with them. but we're also not going to let them put on us things that we don't need to own. And so
Well, they
they
also know how you're training them. They also know that they got the best training out there, so.
Oh, yeah, yes, I've had OSHA actually show up with my clients and say, no, you're good. We know who you guys are. We don't need to inspect you. Well, that's unheard of in the roofing industry, but that's what my clients experience with OSHA. So they do tend to leave you alone when you're very well trained and you know policies and procedures and you're going to hold them to that. They'll go somewhere else where they know they can find a whole lot of stuff.
Sure.
Right. And so that's typically what happens. So don't be afraid to establish good relationships and have a good rapport and a good working relationship with them. But at the same time, it's good to develop a mutual healthy respect too.
Most definitely. Now, one thing that I think was really cool to also walk through is you were explaining to me when this OSHA inspection happened, which I believe was just a few days ago, that they called you on the phone and you said when you were talking to the inspector, you were looking for 4 things. There's four reasons why they are on site. Can you walk through what those 4 things are? You were making sure that
Yes, whenever you are talking to an OSHA inspector, so say that, the safety director arrives to the project. The OSHA inspector's been waiting for an hour for the safety director or the company management to show up. It's very important for the safety director or the company management to, introduce themselves obviously to the OSHA inspector, thank them for coming out to make sure everybody is healthy and safe today. And then the next thing that I always say is, may I ask you, what is the nature of your visit today? In other words, why are you here? And I'm listening for 4 things. That inspector better tell me one of 4 things, because if he or she says, oh, I was just driving by and I saw some high vis and so I'm curious, that is not an acceptable reason to initiate an inspection. They cannot do that unless they're under a national emphasis program for a particular thing, like excavations or heat injury and illness, things like that. Otherwise, they cannot just drive by and initiate an inspection because they see high vis. So what I'm looking for and what I'm listening for is I'm here because this is a programmed inspection, okay? Every inspector has a territory and they do look at those high hazard industries like construction. They pull the permits in the area, they look at Dodge reports and things like that, and then they plan and program their inspections for those high hazard industries in their area according to their schedule. So, okay, if you tell me this is a programmed inspection, it's my day, this job just is on his calendar for this day, and here we go, they're gonna look at everything. They will leave no stone unturned in that type of an inspection. If they tell me this is a complaint or a referral, then I will ask the inspector, what exactly was the complaint? I have the right to know what my accusers are accusing me of, right? And I have the right to see that and to know. So I will ask if there are photos, somebody sent them a photo, I will ask to see that photo. I will ask what the complaint is about, and then I will take them right to that area only. You don't have to allow them to do an entire site inspection. You can take them to the one area of concern and they have the right to look at that, and that's it. And then after that, you simply say to them, well, you've seen everything that you came here to see, that you were concerned about. Is there anything that you would like the contractors to do? Is there anything that you would like the employees to do to remedy a situation? And if he says, I think we're good, then you can close it out. And so I always try to push to get that closing conference done. You don't want them coming back the next day, which they have the right to do. If they see something you need to get better equipment or safety processes in place, they may say, I'm going to come back tomorrow to look at this, check up on you and close it out. If they tell me that they were here because this was an imminent danger situation, that means they were driving by and they saw somebody, contractors on the roof with no fall protection, etc. That is an imminent danger situation that they have both a legal and a moral obligation to inspect immediately to prevent fatalities from happening. So then it's game on at that point. The other reason that they will initiate an inspection, which is more of an investigation, is when there has been a fatality or a catastrophe, which according to OSHA is any incident that causes 3 or more people to be hospitalized. They'll always do an investigation after those things. And we by law have to cooperate with them, and they have the right to interview everybody on site. Normally, OSHA, they can go and talk to any employee, but employees for a normal inspection have the right to say, I'm not comfortable talking to you. Please talk to my foreman or my crew leader. OSHA doesn't like employees to know that. They try to bully employees into talking to them, but it always falls on the employee's comfort. If the employee's not comfortable, they have the right to not talk. The crew leader, the foreman, the superintendent, they are the competent person in charge on that site, so they don't have that luxury. But they can default to their safety director. and pull the safety director in. So there's a whole process and protocol here that's very, very important, especially as we see the regulatory environment growing and the inspectors and the regulators getting more aggressive. It's really, really important to incorporate this training into your company training.
That's awesome insight, Tammy. Well, thank you so much for all your time today and insight. I know all the contractors that are listening will be very interested just to get some nuggets of information. And if anybody has any questions for you, Tammy, how do they get a hold of you?
I'm all over social media at Tammy K Clark, or you can email me. My email is Tammy, it's Tammy at standupmichigan.com.
Sounds great. And if anybody has any questions for us, it's roofingcontractor.com, wconline.com, or buildingenclosureonline.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for all our free content, whether they're videos or podcasts or webinars or e-newsletter, our website, everything you need to know all in one spot. But most importantly, stay safe and healthy, right, Tammy? We got to stay safe and healthy.
Absolutely.
And we can't wait to talk to you next time.